Focusing on law enforcement, we catch up with HPD Police Chief Joe Logan.
Plus, the man slated to direct the Department of Law Enforcement is joining us live here in studio. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suchi and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in here on this Tuesday to Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now. We have a show where we're going to be getting to our first guest in just a few moments. But as we always do, we want to encourage you, the viewers, to participate in the conversation. This really is a two-way street. So if you have questions for our guests, please head over to Facebook and insert your question to the comment section. Or you can do so also by scanning this QR code that you see at the bottom of your screen. We'll be scanning it and monitoring the questions throughout our show.
And we want to welcome in our first guest, and that is HPD Chief Joe Logan. Chief, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and present and talk story for a little half hour or so.
Yeah, it's always great to catch up with you. I want to, of course, start with the incident that is really fresh in the minds of our community, and that is the fireworks on New Year's Eve and the devastation that occurred. Let's start with the case itself, and then let's broaden out to enforcement on this issue overall. In terms of the investigation, how is that going?
Well, first of all, a very tragic situation that happened, and our prayers and thoughts go out to all of those that are impacted. The investigation is still ongoing. There are people that brought illegal fireworks to the site. Unfortunately, those illegal fireworks somehow ignited, and then a large group of those fireworks that were not protected well further ignited into the explosion that we had. That interrupted and probably, unfortunately, 4 people lost their lives. 6 people are on the mainland going through burn treatment, and then another, 2 dozen or so were injured. So a large operation ongoing with the Honolulu Police Department. Our homicide detail is investigating this. We're looking at charges anywhere from manslaughter, reckless endangering, endangering the welfare of a minor, and a plethora of illegal fireworks. Whether we're looking at what happened to the individual who perhaps lit it, perhaps the individuals who brought the fireworks, who purchased the fireworks, and where did they come from and who brought them in. So all of that is part of an investigation. It's complex. There's still a lot of evidence to go through, such as cell phone and video pictures that are either from home ring cameras or from cell phones that were collected, or people said, hey, I've got something that you need to see. And so we're working through all of that. I think we're getting closer. We're working closely with the prosecutor's office and getting closer to some closure where there may be some arrests here in the near future.
And so when you're having those conversations, it is obviously a difficult situation where you have this tragedy and people have been hurt, but you're also trying to find some answers. So have you spoken to those directly involved, maybe those who are still injured? I mean, are they part of this investigation and this process, all the while trying to recover through this tragedy as well?
Yes, all of them are witnesses until we can figure out otherwise. Maybe they are a suspect, but that remains to be seen based on the evidence. So our investigators working diligently every day trying to find all the answers, and we'll follow the facts wherever that leads us to. And if individuals that may be in the hospital need to be interviewed more as a suspect and not a victim, then our investigators will take all that and work through the processes as need be. But we're working closely with the prosecutor's office to make sure that everything we're doing, they understand what we're doing, and we're following guidance to make sure that what happens, we can find the truth. And then hold those accountable who need to be.
And when you think about accountability, I mean, how far up the chain do you go? You're talking about the person who lit the match, the person who made the purchase. Do you also go to the person who perhaps imported those goods or sold them as a second or third party? I mean, how far do you go?
We'd like to go all the way to the top, wherever that leads us to as how they came into the island. And so I think that's from a broader enforcement standpoint and looking at our federal and state partners. How do we all work together towards enforcement and interdicting the illegal flow of illegal fireworks into the state and to the city and county? So that's really the longer pole in the tent that we're reaching for. And we can't do that alone. That's not HPD alone. That's our federal partners interdicting at the harbors and containers and how these things are coming to the islands. So we got to work through all of that. It's going to take us a little while to figure this all out.
You know, when we just look at everything that has transpired over New Year's, right, and what this isn't, of course, we have seen the amount of illegal activity with these aerial fireworks through many generations
Absolutely.
now. And so from HPD's standpoint, I mean, what has been the protocol for these types of, maybe not this instance particularly, but on these evenings where you see all of these fireworks? How do you manage when you look and see the amount of people who are clearly breaking the law? At what point do you say this is too much for us to even do anything? And how do you react when when the problem seems this wide scale?
Right. There's no way I have enough officers to arrest or cite our way out of this predicament that we're in today. It really is, what is the residents and visitors of the city and county, what do you want to see and what would you like? Do you want to be safer? Do you think that this is well beyond what we're capable of doing as a society? So do we want to continue with these kinds of illegal fireworks, put our families in jeopardy, put our homes in jeopardy, our properties that we paid money for? Is that what we want to do, and make sure that if we want that safe and we want to make sure that we can keep that safe, then we need the whole of community to help us. We need associations that have rules and can enforce rules within their property and areas of their neighborhoods to help us with stricter rules. Now, of course, many parts of the island, there's no association that can do that. And so as a city and county, we need to help with that. This morning we saw with the governor's state of the state talking about fireworks, right? So where does that lead the legislature and the enforcement? So right now, the way the police officers enforce, it's on view. It's what the officer sees at the time, and that's rare. Sometimes you can get to the right place at the right time to see the illegal fireworks fire off. And then sometimes officers might be driving through an area where fireworks are going off. But they might be on a call to another area, and so we have to go by priority what the calls are. And so it's difficult for our officers to handle all of this situation. As you can see, there's tens of thousands of people firing off illegal fireworks. So how do we do that?
Yeah, and going back to what the governor has talked about this morning, there already seems to be some division among lawmakers as to whether or not to strengthen the laws and to try to make them stricter, or whether that the existing laws are enough and that enforcement is not there. Yeah. Where do you fall on that debate?
So there's parts of the law where the definition of illegal fireworks and aerials is a little more problematic, in that I would need an expert to come to court to testify that it had so many grains of powder that would ignite like a black powder. And you got to analyze and have somebody testify to that. What was the weight of that? And then it has certain codes and numbers for the transportation of these illegal aerials. And so we have to understand all of that. And that's really, I think that definition is a little too broad. If you ignited something, went up in the air and made a loud boom, that's kind of common sense. It's a firework. And then once it goes boom, the evidence is destroyed. I've got nothing for the officer to bring to court, right? So how do we do all of that? And so we need a little more leeway in how we define aerial fireworks, a little more common sense. And then I think perhaps we can more focus on the interdiction of bringing illegal fireworks in. So what is that network? What is that system? Where are they coming from? Are they coming from a foreign country, say such as China, that makes fireworks, or are they coming from the mainland? And both of those, I need federal partners to help us interdict that part. And so there should be federal laws that perhaps would help us as the state level also. So we're looking at maybe changing the definition or broadening the definition, and then a little more enforcement teeth on the what is the end result of maybe more jail time, maybe more fine. And then you as a property owner, what is your insurance you're paying for that property? If you're firing off illegal fireworks and you have video, say somebody had a drone out, which they're always out there, not legally, but they're flying around, and you see that, then you as an insurance carrier, you're like, well, wait a minute, am I going to pay the person who's firing off illegal fireworks, right? So there's a whole agency part of the insurance network on how that's going to go forth. And really, if you want to take care of your families, I would ask, all the families that are out there, next year, if you're invited to a New Year's Eve party or even 4th of July is coming, and ask the simple question, are there fireworks? Are they legal? And if they're not, then do you want to risk you're bringing your family to that party? Unfortunately, that the tragedy we have on New Year's Eve that happened.
How much do you think the public will play a role in helping to monitor this moving forward? Whether there be a hotline that people can call or they can report something on there, because there's no way that HPD is going to be able to enforce everything, and it might be good to have some of these eyes and ears on the ground. And I also say this not just necessarily confined to New Year's Eve, but we have many people who have complained about fireworks that go off in the middle of the day, in the middle of the night, throughout the year. Do you foresee some sort of public engagement that could help in this process?
Right. It's working with the prosecutor's office or the state attorney general's office to say, hey, for those that are prosecuting cases that maybe an officer is sent after the fact, the fireworks went up, but a neighbor caught it on their Ring camera and caught the individual and you can identify who that person is. Or maybe you had your phone that you recorded your neighbor doing this and you turn that over to us. We take that to the prosecutor's office to make a case, and then we need them to, are they able to take that forward to the courts and have the courts do what their role is. And so we really need all the players in this criminal justice system to do their part, such as prosecution, such as judges making decisions and to help either find them guilty or not guilty of the violation that we see and then hold them accountable.
You're really talking about a cultural shift here.
Absolutely.
And, do you think that this is the incident that really changes our community? I mean, I can't think of something worse. We had a 3-year-old die. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than having a child die, right? So, and you just see the level of injury and the level of trauma. Do you think that this will be the thing that turns the tide for us?
It should be. I would hope it is. Because here you have a 3-year-old that died. You have 3 other adults that passed away. You've got 6 people in a hospital on the mainland. And oh, by the way, a little while before that, or shortly thereafter, in the same area of Kalihi, you had another individual, an adult, a young person who tried to hold an aerial and ended up dying. And so is that what we want in the city and county of Honolulu? We want people to die from aerial fireworks that people are buying because it seems to be fun. But obviously it's not fun. And they're not used, the people who are buying these illegal fireworks are not trained to operate like we have in the fireworks shows that are put on either Waikiki or in various places around the Oahu. So that's the safest place to sit and watch if you're excited about aerial fireworks. But we don't need this in our neighborhoods. And I think you're spot on that this is, I think, a defining moment in the future of Hawaii. How are we in the city and county of Honolulu going to look at this and say, hey, we really need to do something. But I need everyone's help because we can't do this by ourselves.
Let's switch gears here and just talk more broadly about public safety throughout the island of Oahu and where things are at. Of course, it's still new here in 2000. We're 21 days in. But just from your accounts, what can you say about just overall public safety and some of the instances that we've, of course, been hearing and have reported on, but just overall, your assessment of just public safety as a whole as we enter this year?
Sure. From a crime statistic point of view, crime is still down. It's down overall within the city and county of Honolulu. As you know, District 8 or the west side, Waianae, Maile, and Nanakuli area had its kind of dealt with a lot of use of firearms in the commission of crimes, whether homicides, attempted homicides, and assaults. And while we arrested a lot of those people that were involved in that, as a matter of fact, I think we arrested both and have closed most of those cases. Today, I think Waianae Nanakuli is much safer than it was, say, 6-8 months ago. And that I get from the statistics that's coming out. We're out there enforcing. We have provided more officers and more capabilities out there to the commander as she wants to help with the community in that area. She also has Kapolei and Eva to worry about, not just Waianae Nanakuli. And so she's dealing with all of that, and she's doing very well with what she has and the resources and those that we're providing to her. But what's the next location in the city and county of Honolulu? The next area? Kalihi looks like it may have a little more issues than our other districts, and so how do we help that community next? And so that's what we're looking for. So I think we found a different way to address each district area. And so we're providing more resources for a short period of time for them to be able to interdict and stop the crime that's happening in there, or at least curb it drastically. And I think we've done that on the west side. We've seen a lull in, and knock on wood that we don't see something else in the future. We're kind of superstitious when we talk about crime and things that may or may not happen. But I think things are moving well in the west side. That doesn't mean they're crime free. Unfortunately, there are still individuals out there that are callous, careless, and don't care about others. And so how do we help the community with all of those? But again, it's not everybody needs to be incarcerated, right? So how do we help to hold people accountable for actions that they do, maybe at the community level and other things within the community as a whole? So working through all of that. So it's a whole of community impact, not just the Honolulu Police Department.
And it really all comes down to resources, and something that you know, from the interview process throughout every time we speak to you, you know, when you were getting the job and now being on the job for 2 years, it comes down to recruitment and retention. And so how is that going? I know that, you know, those numbers don't seem to be changing in a meaningful way. And you know, you've added the bonuses. How are those working? Are you able to get the boots on the ground that you need?
So we have the boots on the ground. We could use more, absolutely. But we have over 1,700 officers, sworn officers that are on their streets, and at various times, not all of them at one time, but there's several hundred at each given shift that are out there protecting the city and county. Right now, we're in the process. We're up 22% in our applications for recruits. In 2023, we're a little over 1,700. Now we're over 2,100. And that seems to be holding steady. Our number one recruiting tool is family and friends. So those that are in the department, that have friends in the department, have talked to somebody who made it an interest that they joined. And so that still leads the way. The number two is social media. So maybe shows like this or other things that are online that the generation that we're looking for is seeing it and gets interested in law enforcement. The bonus is part of that. But that's not the reason people are joining. It's not about the money. It's about the pride and serving a purpose higher than yourself. And that's really the kind of individuals. We're working closely with the Department of Education because there are schools out there such as Mililani, Pearl City, Castle, Waipahu, and Kapolei that have law enforcement kind of tracks within their high school. And so how do the teachers identify those individuals that are at their schools that may be interested, or maybe they think that they should be interested in law enforcement? So we put them through a week-long course. We just finished one here recently, even with middle school teachers and administrators, to look a mini recruit school, let's say, and then so they get an idea what it's like to be a police officer. They do ride-alongs. They participate in exercises, shoot, don't shoot kind of scenarios and what they would do. And we put them through some real world kind of things with defending themselves and protecting others. And so they kind of get an idea what it means to be a police officer. How does that like? And so they're helping us. So, you know, we have the cadet program we brought back. And so that's doing very well. We have 14 hired since last January. We have 11 today. 3 are graduating next Friday. A group of 28 young new officers are going to be graduating at McKinley High School on Friday, the 31st, and so they'll be entering the next phase of training. And so we've hired 107 this year, and we've retired around 74, 75. So this seems like a slight increase. Last year, I think we hired 74, but we lost 68 to retirement. But, you know, this is a stress job, right? And after 25, 30, 32 years, it's about time to say, hey, I've had enough with this stress. How do it's time now to decrease or decompress, right? And they're in their mid to late 50s, and so that's about the time to leave. And so as much as I want people to stay longer because they enjoy the job and like what they're doing, but it's how do we balance that, right? And we still need upward mobility, right? So we can't hold everybody in, and then the young officer never feels that I'm going to get promoted, so then they lose interest perhaps in the job.
Is there any specific area within the department that you see more of a demand or a need for right now? Because I think when we think police officers, we obviously think those who are on the streets. But HPD, there are so many different departments and jobs within the department. Is there any one specific area that you feel is more in need right now for filling specific key positions?
I think our communications officers, not our commissioned officers that are on the streets, although that's extremely important, but our communications officers, the ones that are what we used to call dispatchers, that take the 911 calls, transfer that to the call taker, transfer that to the radio operator, who's the communications officer, who's sending the officers to the assigned cases, who's looking at what's going on. And so, we have probably about high 20% vacancies in that department, and so that's something that we're really looking at. How do we fill that? So we've done some things such as relook at the exam, the entrance exam to come in, realign that into the entry level, and so here's a way to get more applicants that may either one have not passed before to come back and take another look at it, not to make it easier, but still make it challenging, but at the same time make it so it's at the appropriate level of how we want that communications person to come into our department. So we've seen an increase in the number of applicants that are coming in for that. So that's really our priority, is to fill that department as much as we can, and then fill our patrol officers. Extremely important to officers be on the street, but we also need the investigators to do their part, because the officers make an arrest for felony. We need investigators to take that case from that point to the prosecutor's office for prosecution. And so our officers don't generally do that. They have their part on patrol, so we have to fill those. So there's, Kalei, you bring up a good point. There's a plethora of things in the department to do, and all kinds of positions, whether in traffic, in enforcement, whether it's patrol or it's undercover kind of operations. So we need all of those filled so that we can attack the problems that we have based and using the resources that are the most reliable in making the impact.
One of the creative ways the department has sort of supplemented the patrols is with cameras, specifically looking at Chinatown. How is that going? Is that program up and running, and are you hoping to expand that to more areas of the county?
So Chinatown and Waikiki both have cameras. I think the cameras in Chinatown is going to increase some more. I think they've only done phase 1 and 2, so there's a couple more phases, probably another 20 or 30 cameras to be installed. I think Waikiki, how can we expand Waikiki to help? And so it's working right now in that, the cameras are there. The officers, if they're at the station, aren't really looking at the cameras. They're available if volunteers want to come in and ascertain or sit there and watch the cameras for a few hours a day, then they can. But right now what we use mostly is those cameras for is, if an incident happened, then this is a way for the investigator to come back and say, hey, can we pull up this portion of time so that I can take a look and then figure out who maybe the suspect is based on the cameras, and we can follow and backtrack how the perpetrator came to the scene, what happened, and what direction of flight they went in, and maybe ID them from the cameras.
Speaking of Chinatown and the downtown area, one of the biggest issues that many in the community and businesses have had to deal with is homelessness in the area. And the establishment of the CORE program was really meant to help take the pressure off HPD having to deal with homelessness and, not only just getting them off the streets, but helping to provide them the support that's needed. Since its inception, and have you seen any difference with the CORE program and the impact that it's had on the officers and their ability to do their job in these areas?
No, absolutely. It's a great relationship that we have with CORE and the officers in that specific downtown Kalihi area, which is the corridor where they operate. We'd like CORE in every district on the city and county of Honolulu, because unfortunately there's homeless everywhere. It seems like homeless is down over the years. It's I think we briefed something like 4,000 or 5,000. It used to be 7,000 or 8,000 at any one given time. So that seems to be working. There are other resources in the Kalihi area that would help with the homeless, whether it's a kauhali or it's a medical psychological resource center that we can bring individuals to voluntarily if they so choose, to help with their education. So homelessness is a not just one central location of Oahu, but how can we expand working with EMS in the city, and how can they expand CORE to help us? But it's a great relationship. It's working very well. And right now it's one of the things when they are operating, they can do so much more to help the either reduce or de-escalate situations with them being there. We're there for more for security, but they take the lead as far as the individual. They're not a danger necessarily or violent with any kind of weapon system, but more so they're going through some kind of crisis. So what does that mean and how to handle that?
I want to go back to something that the governor actually talked about today, and that is gun violence, and talking about the illegal guns in our community, ghost guns. Steve Alm was on here, Prosecutor Steve Alm was on here a couple weeks ago and talked about, I can't remember the specific numbers, but he said it was, I believe, more than double the amount of ghost guns that they had encountered from year over year. Where are you finding these, and you know, how serious are you taking this problem?
Oh, it's extremely serious. It's how are they getting in, right? Or are they making them with 3D printers, or are they bringing parts in, right? So that may be through parcel services, it may be through on the airport in luggage, or it may be they're just having it shipped in through on a container. So those are the ways how it's getting in. We need to understand and work with our federal and state partners on that. But I think we're up to 60 or plus of ghost guns just in 2024. Which is double what we saw in 2023 and 2022. So a lot more ghost guns are out there. And just from rifles or assault type rifles to handguns, they're not very reliable, but they only need to fire once in your direction, and unfortunately that was going to cause harm. So they're dangerous. They're in, I would say the younger adults are the ones that are operating these types of guns, but really it's run the gamut, what we've seen over the last year, either on the west side, Kalihi area, and even as far as Waikiki and Hawaii Kai. So we've seen them all over, not necessarily more in large numbers in downtown Kalihi and west side. But how are they getting them is where we're looking at, where they're coming from. And so those are the guns we want to get off the streets. And the other one is, you know, these gun buyback and other things that the state has put on. Those are great opportunities to get guns off the street, and they work very well. But there's also a number of guns out there that maybe have been stolen years ago in a burglary case, and we're seeing more and more of those turn up as we're arresting individuals who are committing crimes with firearms.
It is the start of the legislative session, so no doubt there are going to be a number of bills that you'll be tracking. I'm just curious to know your thoughts about some of the ones that we're already beginning to hear about. Of course, we know Republicans are looking to introduce a stand your ground law measure. There's also, you know, lowering the blood alcohol level that didn't pass last session. They're expected to try that again. Beyond those two, or if you can comment on those and anything else that you're really tracking this legislative session.
So we're really looking at what fireworks, the definition, and how that's going to play out during this session. Number two is e-bikes, the classification, the different types of e-bikes. There's more than one. There's at least 3 or 4 different categories of e-bikes. What is the future of how we're going to look at that? How the keiki riding those things, and what protection are they wearing? And are they using it in a proper manner? Are they doing wheelies down the middle of the city street? Is that a violation? And so enforcement is the bigger problem, but these are things we're looking at through the Department of Transportation, HPD, and the legislature. The other one, as you said, is I'm sorry, just had to bring
Stand your ground.
Stand your ground. That's one that was tried either last year or the year before. It looked like it was going to pass, and then last minute it wasn't. You know, Hawaii, we're used to not being armed, not having our citizens armed. Right now, I can tell you there's over 1,000 citizens that have a license to carry a firearm. They met the requirements, and so they have them. But we are not a stand your ground state, and I really think that may be a disservice, because now we're going to get into confrontations. We already have road rage incidents. We have other things where people are drawing firearms, but they're not using them, knock on wood, but they have them. And so how do we help the community? And I think right now it's, you know, shooting is a last resort kind of thing. If you discharge your firearm at an individual, whether you under the guise that you believe you have the right to do that, but you don't understand the financial and the emotional what you've caused to yourself and your family that's going to happen from there and on into the future, because lawyers are going to get involved. There'll be lawsuits and other things, and so we face that all the time as police officers if we draw our firearms and use them. And so the average citizen is going to have to face all of that. Now, granted, they're alive and they're going to have to deal with that, but a stand your ground I think is going to escalate a situation which we're not into right yet. I think we have law-abiding citizens for the most part that are following the rules. And to date so far, that those that have licenses to carry have not done something drastically wrong to lose their license. There might be one or two that we're involved in, but
Yeah, and following up on Ryan's question about the blood alcohol, Ed Sniffen was on here saying that, impaired driving is one of the causes of why we've seen as many fatalities as we did last year. They want to, he is one of many voices that wants to lower the blood alcohol level to 0.05 from 0.08. What are your thoughts on doing that?
I think it's a good idea. I think drunk driving, impaired driving is something that's an issue and a concern for our city and county. We did have over 50 unfortunately 50 individuals that can't go home for this year and last year that passed away. A lot of those were pedestrians, so over half I think were pedestrians. And so is it impaired driving that's hindering the pedestrian? Not most, some of them were not even in crosswalks. So, granted the person operating the vehicle is at fault for the person, but what did they do to cause them put themselves in harm's way, right? And so we're not arresting individuals that are pedestrians for being impaired, right? But I think it's a great point to have people, you really got to pay attention when you drive because you got to watch out for the e-bikes. We just had an e-bike incident earlier last week where an individual lost their life. And so those things are dangerous. Bicycles in general, unfortunately with cars on the road, mix that together, it's a danger. And so pedestrians also crossing the street in unmarked crosswalks, that's also causing a danger. So the ability for you to be 100% aware and cognizant of what's going on as you're driving is most important. So dropping it down to 0.05, I think is the right thing to do.
We are almost running out of time, but I did want to bring in a question that was sent in through our QR code, and it goes back to the fireworks. And, this person wants to know why fireworks can't be banned outright, not necessarily just illegal fireworks, but could there be a time where we just say no more any type of fireworks? Do you think that's realistic? And is that something that you think would help solve this?
I think, well, when you start banning things, that's when the black market opens up, and that's when illegal activity starts. We noticed, I think, aerials have always been around, but in very small numbers. You were talking maybe less than 100 people firing off prior to the ban of fireworks that we have today. Once we created that ban probably 7-8 years ago, then this black market kind of erupted, and people try to do what I guess the government is asking them not to do. So maybe it's an idea. I don't think it'll be a total ban because the population of the city and county of Honolulu, there are a number of us that believe that it's cultural, right? So the Chinese New Year, they fire off fireworks, whether fireworks can get rid of demons and other things that may be impacting their properties. So there's that cultural piece. Maybe there's more shows that are controlled environments where we have those for individuals to fire off fireworks, but not so much at home. So I don't know how enforcement's the bigger issue. We can say no more. We've done that with illegal narcotics, but we're fighting that battle also. And it looks like they're using the same avenues of trading, getting the devices in that they're following with illegal narcotics. So it kind of parallels each other. Mm-hmm. So we can ban things, but then it becomes even a more difficult thing to enforce.
I want to ask you about our next guest. We'll be talking with him about fireworks quite a bit. That is Major Mike Lambert, who has now been nominated to head up the Department of Law Enforcement. You've worked closely with him. What are your thoughts about his nomination and about this department, because it is a relatively new agency?
Yes, so we've worked with the Sheriff's Office, a portion of DLE, but Mike is a great choice. I've known Mike for the last 2.5 years. He was a fellow finalist for this position of police chief. And I've got to know him from that time, and I think he's well suited for this position. Yes, it's our loss. We're going to lose an individual who had, potential to lead at the higher levels in the department. And as he was working through that, but this opportunity, not something you turn down, the governor who's asked you to do something and lead this department. And I think the relationship between us and DLE is a good relationship, as are other federal and state partners. And so, I look at Hawaii as a gated community, the city and county of Honolulu. We're 2,500 miles away from everyone. So being that, we need to work with each other. And so that partnership, having Mike there, DLE, and myself, knowing each other, understanding each other, and working together to solve issues, concerns, and problems, that's move forward. And whatever we can do as HPD and myself as chief to help Mike integrate and be successful, I'm right there with him.
Okay, well, Chief, so good to catch up with you today. Thank you for being here. We are going to be speaking with Major Mike Lambert right after the break. Stay with us. You're watching Spotlight Now.
Hello and welcome back here to Spotlight Now as we continue on in our law enforcement show here. We want to, of course, continue to encourage you to be active and get involved in our conversation by scanning this QR code for our guests as we continue on in our conversation.
And we want to welcome in now Major Mike Lambert, who is with Honolulu Police Department, but got a call, I believe, last week from the governor to now head up the Department of Law Enforcement. A lot of people might not be too familiar with this agency because it did sort of stand up last year. But tell us a little bit, Major, about the call that you got. And, this is the very definition of being called to service as opposed to putting your name in the hat, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a huge opportunity for me. I'm very honored that the governor's team would reach out to me to offer me this opportunity. And I think that sometimes when you're building a big program, it's like building a building and you need different people for different phases. So I just want to say thank you to Director Lowe for the foundation that he's built. He will forever be the first director of law enforcement, and I hope to honor his sacrifice by building up the rest of the pieces that need to happen for that agency to be successful. For people to understand what the Department of Law Enforcement is, it's several agencies that operated independently within the state, and the idea was for it to come together so that there's a lot more collaboration, a lot more cooperation between the different entities. So it didn't feel so disjointed whenever there was a state level issue.
Okay.
You know, when you look at this department, it is, again, as we said, fairly new, but it has come with some challenges. And of course, the director who was in that role, Director Ono, leaving this position now. What do you think you can bring to the table to help bring stability and help this new department move forward in a way that will not only be positive, but will continue to make a difference in the community?
Right. So, you know, when this opportunity came up, you know, I definitely know that they're having their growing pains and actually what I watch on the news. So for me, I'm always looking for the greatest challenge. If you guys take a look at my career as a captain, I took on people that were experiencing homelessness. I created the Homeless Outreach and Navigation for Unsheltered, the HONU, and actually that program has outlived even HPD. It has gone back to the Department of Community Services, and it's helped thousands of people, right? Then I had the challenge of restructuring the training division. We were having some struggles there with trying to, I guess, connect with the younger demographic. Before I was there, it was more of a drill instructor type mentality, and I switched it to a more coaching mentality. And since then, we were able to stabilize the amount of people that weren't passing. And then, of course, in my current assignment as narco vice, right, taking on fentanyl, firearms, internet crimes against children, and in front of mine is the fireworks issue. So I think that for me, when I was offered this opportunity, when I look at the landscape of law enforcement in Hawaii, it was the biggest challenge available. And I think that those that know me know that I love a great challenge and I couldn't turn it down.
Well, a challenge it certainly is. So 22 years at HPD, now transferring over. You do have a Senate confirmation to get through, but assuming that that all goes well, when you look at the issue of fireworks, what do you see as DLE's role in enforcement, and where do you think they can take the lead that HPD perhaps cannot?
Right, so definitely we are a small agency, and I'm going to go ahead and after February 1st, I'll be briefed up on what we can actually do with the amount of personnel we have. But the difference that we have over our counties is that we're a state agency, meaning that our investigation can span each county versus the counties are limited to their jurisdiction. So what I hope to do is leverage resources, leverage information, because fireworks permeates through the state, right? Predominantly, most come through Honolulu, but then they make their way out. So making sure that we have a strong network and that the counties feel supported either through training or funding or cross-deputization, whatever it takes for us to kind of be that real web of law enforcement so that things don't get through the cracks.
When it comes to this issue, how much have you already been engaged in? Because we know that there have been conversations already between the governor, between the mayor, and other stakeholders after this tragedy on New Year's. What can you tell us about those conversations if you've been involved? And if not, what do you think would be the best solution moving forward, and how this department can play a critical role in seeing that this changes?
Sure. So I haven't been briefed by Governor's team yet on his exact strategy, but what I do know is crystal clear that I need to work really quickly to make a difference. And I'm sure that I'm going to have support of all the counties to do that. Coincidentally, I've actually been working on this firework issue since June of 23. I identified that the language was very difficult to prosecute. That was confirmed by our prosecutor's office. So actually in late June, I actually reached out to the Department of Justice, their National Training and Technical Assistance Center, and I was able to get a grant to do a legal scan. So what they did for us is they did a legal scan of all 50 states, fireworks laws, different types of prosecution, and where they were successful. And that report actually came out in July of 24. Because of the rise in ghost guns, I pivoted in August and September to focus on firearms legislation, both state and federal. And then, of course, because of the tragedy in Aliamanu, I've refocused my efforts on fireworks. So I'm really well versed on what the issues, and I think the biggest hurdle we have is making the current law more user-friendly, I guess is the simplest way to say.
You know, when we had Ed Sniffen on here from the Department of Transportation, he was just saying that because we ship so many goods into our communities, it's basically impossible to inspect every container. But are there methods you think that the Department of Law Enforcement could get involved with at the harbor, since that is part of the purview of this agency, to try to catch them there?
Absolutely. So because of the thousands and thousands of containers that come in, it is a needle in a haystack, and that's where We're going to have to make sure that we have strong tip lines. We're going to have to make sure that we have strong laws. And there are algorithms for shipments coming in that our federal partners are willing to share as long as we're willing to take action. So I think without giving away too much on what the strategy is, I am confident that we can identify containers, and with the change in law, we can get prosecution.
The other thing we know that DLE has done, and again, we know that you are just being appointed to this, so you're not officially in this role as its director, and you still have that process to go through. But with the surrender fireworks program that was happening and the amount that we saw coming in, do you feel that the department should continue to do more of these? And how do you encourage the public to maybe surrender some of these illegal fireworks that they may have in their own possession?
Yeah, those amnesty programs will absolutely continue. I think that Governor shared that at the State of the State for both fireworks and firearms. And it's very encouraging because I think last year the Department of Law Enforcement, I think there was around 500 pounds that were turned in, and this year it was closer to 1,400. So I think with the accident that happened, the tragedy there is a shift in public sentiment. And I think as long as we continue with the education, we ramp up enforcement, I think that whatever supplies people do have, hopefully they'll do the right thing and turn them in.
Yeah, I want to ask you sort of the similar question that I asked the chief about this sort of culture change that needs to happen. I mean, how do you address that? How do we get people to shift their thinking about that these are not necessarily just fun and games, but also very dangerous potential weapons?
I hate to say it, but we have to be, I guess, gruesomely honest on what happens when you get burnt. We may have to show images that make your stomach upset. And then we have to do a lot of education around what these devices really are. If you think about it, especially the larger fireworks, if you were to put anything metal around it, like nails or bullet or BBs, it would basically meet the classification of a bomb, right? So these are very dangerous things. And I think that we have become too familiar or too comfortable with it. And when I grew up, I'll just be honest, right? Fireworks, jumping jacks, bottle rockets. And when you make a mistake, you burn your hand, right? And then you kind of don't touch it for a few weeks. Now you may die, right? And I think that message has to be very direct and very to the point if people are going to change the way they think about it.
I want to go back to just talking about the department as a whole, and because it's a new agency and people are still learning about what exactly the Department of Law Enforcement is, how would you differentiate this from HPD? Because there may be some out there who say, this sounds like a portion of HPD. There's a lot of redundancies. What are some of the more specific things that this department can do, and maybe what you would like to see it do more of, given the opportunity to serve as its director?
Right, so actually, Hawaii is one of the only states in which the city and counties are the lead agencies. Typically, it is the state that leads because they have broader enforcement authority in regards to jurisdiction. So really what I want to do is, without duplicating what the city does, is to make sure that we are taking care of our responsibility and our kuleana to state facilities. So really we want to make sure the courthouses are safe, libraries, schools, understanding that I don't have enough staff based on what I've seen on paper to be everywhere. But basically what I've spoken to Chief Logan about is that if you could start to tell me what state facilities eat up a lot of city services, and then I can start there once I go ahead and assess how many personnel I actually have for police services in the Department of Law Enforcement.
I want to ask you about another thing that is in the DLE's purview, and that is ag crimes. We know that we're not talking about someone stealing mangoes, from a neighbor's tree. We're talking about stealing whole crops. How serious is this issue, and what can be done about it?
I think right now it's understated due to the reported crimes. I think there was another media outlet that said that's in the tens of thousands of unreported, and that's problematic because it's hard for any law enforcement leader, whether it be me, Chief Logan, or any of the county police chiefs, to justify resources to a problem that doesn't look like a big deal on paper. So a lot of the things that we want to do is encourage them to make reports, even if it's over the phone, because then we can understand the scale of the problem. Once you understand the scale of the problem, that's where we can find funding, and that's where we can put resources. But I think it's in the teens was reported. And you're talking about 700,000 or 800,000 reported crimes in Honolulu. So have it being in double-digit numbers won't get the attention that it deserves.
Beyond that, again, we asked Chief Logan this, but this is the start of a legislative session. As a new department, as departments have to go in and ask for money. Is there something else that you would like to see support from the legislature for this department, whether it be more positions, more funding? Again, you guys are new. There's probably a lot of needs. What would you say are some of those priorities for the department in order for it to really get off to a good start?
So I'm not going to have the exact details until I'm actually provided, the actual lay of the land over there. But I think that we have a good broad support in regards of getting it off the ground. But a lot of the things that we want to do is see what we can do first, do that well, and then come back to the table to ask for more funding. Because what I don't want to do is ask for funding that we can't utilize efficiently or responsibly. But I definitely feel that there's going to be a lot of training asks up front. And I'm hoping that that session has started. So I'm hoping that there's some vessels, some bills that exist, that there's opportunities for me to incorporate a large amount of training resources.
I'm just thinking back to a week ago and you getting that phone call from the governor, minding your own business, working on the work that you do. After 22 years at HPD, is it hard to leave that agency and take something on that's new?
Oh, I've never been more scared in my life. But those nerves are what's going to make me be focused. And Honolulu Police Department will always be my first love. And my brothers and sisters there, you're going to get me choked up. But, you can't replicate that. But I have a big heart, and I'm hoping that the DLE will accept me there and that I can have a new family and that they'll embrace what I feel is important in law enforcement and we can be a real player here in the state.
As someone who has been with HPD for some time and hearing some of the comments by Chief Logan, how do you think the department is moving? Because you've seen it through many of its challenges. What's the morale like there? Where do you think the state is of HPD at this moment? And as you leave to potentially join this other agency, how do you see that collaboration moving forward?
I definitely will not be successful without the support of Chief Logan. Honolulu Police Department will always be the standard in Hawaii, and it's important that we work well together. I think that HPD, just like anything else, they have their problems, but they do have a lot of leadership there that can get them through it. So for me, I am sad that I have to transition, but I know that they're in good hands, and I know that they'll figure it out. And Chief Logan has been really great during this transition, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, and you did say that you want DLE to be a real sort of player and partner in this space. In a year from now, if we were to have you back on here, what are your metrics for success? How do you know that you've done a good job at the helm?
In the first year, I definitely want us to be viewed differently in regards to we have a seat at the table. I think right now I have this basketball analogy where when it comes to the Honolulu Police Department, they have 10 players, they have a court, they have basketball. So why do you need us to come, right? So what I want to do is add value to the law enforcement layer at the state so that we can be invited to play on the court. And I'm sure once I show value, all the counties will open up to us and make sure that we just have a seat at the table. And once we have that seat, I think that the officers and the sheriffs within the DLE will rally behind me.
So just from a practical standpoint, what's next for you? You're still the nominee. You're not in that position yet. What does that confirmation schedule look like? What are some of the next steps that you're going to be taking in the next few weeks and months ahead?
First off, I need to go ahead and, Governor had a wonderful state of the state. So I'm hoping to get some FaceTime with him to have him provide me with clear direction on what he expects of me. And then I definitely need to go around to each senator and make sure that what they want and what they expect of me is something that I can meet. Of course, on that regard, I also want to meet some of the House reps because as bills move, they need to move through each side of the House. It's going to be a huge assessment phase up front to see where we are because I don't want to commit to things without even having the resources to do that. So it's going to be pure assessment for the first 2 or 3 months. Then again, there's going to be some training rollout. From there, expectations will be set. And it's about holding myself and my department accountable.
Yeah, and what would you say to the public? I'm assuming that you're going to be recruiting officers. Why do you think that you would be a good person to work under? What pitch do you have to come work at the DLE?
Well, I think that it's a new agency, so if you ever wanted to give law enforcement a try, we are a smaller agency. I think that I can build a more family environment because of that. So if you want to come over and be a part of the future of law enforcement in Hawaii, I go ahead and invite you, and thank you for that.
Okay. Well, Major Mike Lambert, now with the HPD, but likely soon to be the Director of the Department of Law Enforcement, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
We really appreciate your time.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live. We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
First alert traffic is like always having a helpful passenger right next to you.
There's a crash up ahead in the left lane.
When we see a backup, we'll tell you live on TV.
That doesn't look too good.
And send an alert to your phone.
I'll type, you drive.
First alert traffic on TV, streaming, and on the Hawaii News Now app.
Keeping you and your ohana safe.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suchi. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
And a great conversation again today on law enforcement. We started off, of course, speaking with HPD Chief Joe Logan, who gave us an update on what is happening at HPD. Specifically, we started the conversation, of course, around fireworks. And you heard from the chief that there is an ongoing active investigation into what happened on New Year's Eve and in Salt Lake. And it's very interesting to think that through all this tragedy and everything that's happening, HPD is still conducting an investigation. As he says, they're trying to find, they're going all the way to the top. They're trying to find not only who may have lit the firework that ultimately led to this, but also how it got there and how it got into these hands.
Yeah, and a tricky situation also because he did mention that some of the folks who are injured could potentially also be suspects in this case, and navigating all of that on a broader scale, really talking about enforcement, the need to change the law to give officers more authority. And we've heard the governor talk about this as well, that they want to change the law so that it's easier for these cases to get prosecuted, and also talking about the cultural changes that need to happen, really hoping that this changes the mindset in the community. You heard that from our second guest as well, DLE Director of Nominee Mike Lambert, about how these are bombs and people need to recognize that how dangerous they are. Yeah, we'll continue to track this as it goes forward. This will no doubt be a hot topic throughout the legislative process. A number of proposals are moving forward, and we'll continue to see how HPD and other entities really advocate for this, and if there is change that will actually happen. We also got an update on other things that are happening, of course, at HPD. You heard from the chief there that staffing continues to be an issue, but something that he feels is moving in the right direction. The one area that he says that they could need help the most in is communications, or what was formerly the dispatch area, but citing that while retirement numbers continue to be where they're at, he's pretty positive about the inroads they've made so far in recruiting new officers. Yeah, and also great to spend time with Major Mike Lambert, who will likely become the director of the Department of Law Enforcement. Still needs to go through that Senate confirmation process, but laying out his priorities for this agency. It is a relatively new agency, talking about how he really wants to step up enforcement when it comes to fireworks specifically, and citing all of his 22 years with HPD, making a strong case for his nomination. Yeah, we'll continue to track that process as it moves through. Next week, we are going to be switching gears and focusing in on the nonprofits that ultimately do so much work in our community. We're excited for that conversation. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you right back here next week, Tuesday, for another episode of Spotlight Now. Aloha.